Hello, welcome back to Living Soil Garden. Today I'm going to take you around for the tour of the garden, and it's the month of October, so we are in mid-October, and we've had a lot of rain recently. We've had more than 60 millimeters of rain over the last 2 weeks, and some days it's been really pouring down. It's been really heavy rain, and you'll notice that a lot of the vegetables are liking the rain, especially after a very dry summer. But also rain can cause a lot of problems with drainage and with not enough oxygen in the root zone, and also fungal diseases spreading a lot faster. So the focus of today will be on looking at the different interplantings we've got in our garden, and also on how each plant enhances the other, and also on what you can have growing during the winter. So hopefully for next year now, because it's too late to plant any of the things you will see in the garden now, you should have planted those in August or September, in some cases also June and July, in order to have them now. But you'll see that the garden is full, and so hopefully we'll give you some inspiration for next year when it comes to June, July, August, September, to start thinking ahead in terms of what you can have in your garden. In fact, I'm very proud to say that we managed to have the full garden planted. There is no empty bed at this stage. Now any of the empty beds will be filled with green manures, and I'll discuss that as well. But let's get going and look at the beds. So I'm going to start from the tunnel, because this is the space where there has been the most dramatic changes over the past few weeks. If you remember in the last video, and I invite you to have a look at the September tour, there were tomatoes and cucumbers in here, and aubergines. Now what's left of that is a few aubergines on the side, just because they're ripening. I'm just going to show you the aubergines. A few nasturtiums that we'll use in the salads when the ones outside will stop. And then all the tomatoes have been removed with the expert help of our volunteers. And now we've got a lot of salads in here. This is a bed of lettuce, and this is empty, but we'll fill it in the next couple of days. Here we've got a lot of herbs. We've got chervil, we've got landcress, choy sum. Now these need a bit of water actually, and then more lettuce, and then on the far end we've got some spinach. It's mostly just salads. While we're here, I'm going to show you what we've got that still needs to go in. Very little actually. Most of these things are just backup plantings. We've got some lettuce that will go in the bed that you've seen in the polytunnel here. More lettuce, some chard that was a backup. We've got way too much healthy chard, so we might not use those. So more lettuce. These are very last succession of lettuce. We might not use this. Is again a backup, and I do recommend these are Asian greens again as a backup, or just to fill any holes, because those can go in very late. And I wouldn't plant out anything now apart from obviously broad beans and garlic for next year, and perhaps some Asian greens outside will still might still be able to put some growth before it gets too dark and cold. And here we've got some rocket, there you go, and some baby kale, and some more like winter salads, and in here we've got some more lettuce, and that's it. So it's starting to look a bit sad in here. There's not much going on. In the spring here it's so full, you can barely see any empty space. At the moment the space at the top, and here it's been taken by this beautiful autumn crown squash, one of my favorite for the looks and also the flavor. That's just a bit of dirt on there. It's like a butternut squash, but with a different shape of a mini pumpkin. Right, let's go outside now and have a look at how the garden is doing. I'll try to keep this tour relatively short, because I know some of you guys don't have the time to watch a 1 hour long video. So the flowers here looking still stunning and going strong, very strong actually, especially this variety of sunflower, and this is also all Flavia's work really. She manages to keep this very full and pumping not only flowers but also food. There's some chard in here, if you notice. So there's really a lot going on, and it's a big it's a big factor having the aesthetics of the flowers coming into the garden, and especially here at the entrance, where everybody can see them. Right, so let's get going into the beds and have a look at what's going on. Right, there was a bit of sunshine, but it suddenly disappeared, so it all looks a bit grim now, but hopefully it won't take away from the beauty of the garden. So we've got here some interplanting. This is a beautiful one. It looks really pretty, and it's also very effective so far. And some people might think parsley is an allelopathic plant, so a plant that discourages other plants' growth. But we've seen that with kale it goes really, really well. And this is a variety of kale which is called Scarlet, I think. It goes very, very dark purple when it's cold, but now it's kind of halfway between green and purple with beautiful pink veins. It's a really beautiful looking kale. And then here we've got some Chinese leaf interplanted with fennel and chicories, very late chicories. Here we've got some chard and beetroot. Here we've got some Swiss chard and of different colors. And then we've got an interplanting on the sides of lettuce and endive or endive. It looks really beautiful actually, this bed. And they all work very well together. The key here is if you don't harvest the endive, like sometimes we don't sell enough, it's good to cut it down completely, and it will enhance the growth of all the surrounding plants and produce some biomass for your own meals or for compost if you're not going to use it. So you can use it as a service plant on top of being also a harvestable plant, a cash crop if you want. And here, forget those are there for a demonstration we're going to do tomorrow. But here we've got some fennel with cauliflowers on the side, doing very well. Some more fennels now putting in some lovely growth and bulbing up with lettuces on the side. And here a very interesting interplanting of chard and mustard, and the key in this one, I've talked about it in another video on the channel, is that the mustard put on a lot of growth and we cut it and harvest it twice, and then it goes to flower, but by then the chard is so big that it wouldn't let anything else grow well in the middle. And so this combination is really, really strong, very well. It works very well. And the key thing is also to remove the mustards now when the flowers are open but the seeds haven't started forming. Actually, these ones have started forming, so we're going to remove them very soon, otherwise the mustard plant becomes very competitive and takes away from the surrounding plants rather than giving to them. And here we've got perpetual spinach, still going really well. We've been harvesting these every week, and now they're slowed down obviously, but they're still producing well, and we've got very little problems with diseases this year with respect to previous years. Even Cercospora, apart from the beetroots, hasn't attacked anything else. Here we've got some Cavallonero on the side and some lettuces. This is a very late succession of lettuces. We will start harvesting them this week. Outer leaves. Cavallonero has been cleaned up by Flavia, so the stem, this is an important thing, keeping the stem nice and tidy, with no yellow leaves dangling down, otherwise the slugs can take over. And here we've got some very late succession of baby turnips, white Tokyo Japanese turnips. And on this side, some stunning chard with some baby kale in the middle. Now you'll notice that these beds have still got the worst drainage of the whole garden, but initially here there was a big puddle every time it rained. Especially if it rained as much as it's been raining in the last 2 weeks, there'll be a lot of standing water. Now we've added in a lot of drainage, we've raised these beds significantly, and essentially everything works well. There are carrots in here, and this is perhaps the worst bed of carrots in terms of how the soil is, but still lovely, not as long as they could be, but this is a variety that doesn't go extremely long anyway. Amsterdam forcing. And here we were seeing the chard, more fennel and lettuce, a succession that we really, a combination interplanting that we love to do. And this is Salanova lettuce, we've trialed this year. I'm not a big fan of Salanovas because they're patented, they've got a proprietary cultivar, but beautiful and very, very vigorous. So, I can see why they're so popular with commercial growers. And this is watermelon radish, a beautiful type of radish. You might have seen it in our photos, with pink flesh, also called flesh meat, or red meat, because it's got very bacon-like texture when you eat it, when you stir fry it. So let's have a look at this side. So here you can't see anything in this bed in front of me, but this is green manures that we've sown after we removed the courgettes, and also behind the Cavallonero there's more green manures that have been planted in. And this is field beans, black oats, and some rocket used as a green manure, or you can use mustard instead. a Synapsis alba, white mustard. Here's some Asian greens going really well, and I told you Asian greens will put a lot of growth this time of the year. They don't mind having less light and colder temperatures, and they are doing really well. This is called Dragon's Tongue, this is called Komatsuna, and the flowering ones are Choisum, a type of broccoli that produce very, very nice tender stems. Nothing to do with actual broccoli, it's more like a Chinese crunchy veg. Is really tasty. I prefer it to broccoli, to be honest. It's more versatile, you can use it raw, you can cook with it, it produces a lot, and it's unusual. And this fennel here, we're leaving it to go to flower and seeds so that we can harvest the seeds, the flowers in our salads, but also to leave it for the birds over winter. They can come in here and harvest the seed heads as they need, and eat some slugs as well. Here's some more chard, here's some more carrots. Let's have a look at the carrots in this bed. These beds on this side of the garden are very poorly drained, so we expect the compaction to be higher and so the carrots not to be as good. I'm just going to pull one. Yeah, this is doing really well actually. Surprising. This is the worst soil we have in the garden, and the carrots are looking really good. So, you know, it's full circle. We've managed to get very good soil texture despite starting from very heavy clay. And this look, you know, here you can really see the drainage problem. You see these bleaks are very yellowy and much smaller than the ones on the other side, because as we go down there's more compaction. We've improved that with drainage, but we haven't raised this bed, and so compared to the previous ones it's not as well drained. But the bleaks are doing fine, they're just not as happy. So we would eventually raise it with some soil and some compost on top to improve the situation. And these beetroots have got Cercospora, which kills the leaves. It starts as small dots like these, and then when it rains, each splash spreads the disease. But these beetroots were already fully mature, quite big actually. They've done incredibly well, and so it doesn't matter if the leaves are going to spoil. We're going to remove the leaves and sell them as loose roots. And look at the size of this cabbage. It's very hard to put it across how big these guys are. This red cabbage is really enormous. And here, white cabbage with beetroots. We've looked at this succession in previous videos. Very good. The cabbages are getting a bit of explosion problems because of the excess rain, so we need to harvest them soon, and also some slug pressure, but it's fine. The main heads are sealed so the slugs can't get in. And these are Savoy cabbages again at this end, and you can really see the weakest plants have got more damage even from slugs, because when a plant is weaker it's more attractive to pests. When we move on the bed there's less and less damage, and nicer and nicer heads. And these guys would be harvested in late winter, so we might not even harvest them before we move to Italy, but we'll see. So that's an update for those of you who have missed that. We are going to move to Italy at the end of the year, actually at the beginning of 2023. So the garden will be passed on to somebody else, but we'll let you know more about this in the future videos. And this is some baby kale. So you can tell we harvest this end, closer end, for baby leaves, and then we let the far end there and become a bit bigger. And this is a beautiful variety called Red Ursa, one of the most stunning kales, really. So tender, so good to look at. You can use it raw in salads, and there are some field beans that have self-seeded, and that's fine. From last year's green manure, they'll add some nitrogen. These are the watermelon radishes. You see that they've got a green peel on the outside, green and white. When you cut through, it's red flesh, and so you see this watermelon effect. These are muli. Let's have a look. Muli radishes, planted in August. Yeah, they're kind of going quite deep, and then what happens is they pop up because they encounter harder layers of the soil. And so what you can do is you harvest them for food, obviously, and they're nice, or else you can mow them or cut them from the tops, hitting that top part of the root, so that the whole root system, that whole carrot looking radish rots in the ground and adds some organic matter. Here you can see two types of rocket. On my right, a cultivated salad rocket, beautifully mild and also kind of nutty flavour, really interesting. And this is wild rocket, which English palates are more used to from traditional rocket growing. It's called wild. It's not really wild, it's still cultivated, but it's more similar to the wild variant of rocket. This has gone to flower. It's a lot hotter, a lot less interesting flavour in my opinion, but for those of you who like really hot, that's a nice one. And here we've got a variety of radishes. There's some salad radishes. This part is really suffering from slug pressure, and the reason is, obviously there's two sides that border with the field, where slugs can live and do whatever they do. And also there's a lot of rough mulch around the edges where the willow is, and so the slugs really can get in here and do a lot of damage. You can see it even on the radishes. A lot of them have been munched, but that's fine. We'll just remove those, eat them ourselves, and sell the ones that are still intact. These are mostly salad radishes. A bit of weed pressure here as well. This corner of the garden doesn't get as much attention as it should. You can see also the Cavaronero doing amazingly well. Look at the size of this Cavaronero. They split down the middle now. That's a very interesting thing, actually. They do that when they get a bit of damage from pests, or also a bit of boron deficiency. They kind of go hollow in the middle. You can see that. Hopefully you can see that. They go hollow in the middle, and then they split and they produce twice as much. So they might not be as rich in boron, but they do produce wonderful leaves. And we've tested our soil for boron, and it's fine actually now after the work we've done. But some plants require a lot, or sometimes they don't find it at the right time in their life, and then they catch up, because obviously these look very healthy now. I'm sure they've got good levels of boron in the leaves now, but at some point when they were younger, perhaps there was a problem, and either a pest attack or a deficiency for a little bit, and then they split, but then they recovered really nicely. And here this beetroot's now really suffering from the shade and the competition of the willow. Normally when we prune it very low, that encourages actually growth in these neighboring beds, but when we leave it to go high, then the competition is bigger than the actual collaboration. And here we got some broccoli, Bell Star. They're producing a lot of side shoots with beautiful heads, some of which are really big actually. Look at that, that's a side shoot, believe it or not. So yeah, the lighting is a little bit low at the moment, but hopefully you can see everything. Some more broccoli, and there we've been removing a lot of the red cabbages and the parsnips we haven't started harvesting yet. And this was the worst part of the garden for a long time, but now you can see the red kale is doing amazingly well, so we're really pleased with it. And here we transplanted some baby kale, and really have a look at this. There's no slight damage whatsoever, and this bed is full of very rough compost. This is our own compost, so not even fully mature, lots of wood, but slug pressure is very low, so these plants were incredibly healthy in the plugs. So only, I would say, 1 out of 8 shows some signs of damage, but they'll recover, and they're very vigorous plants. And the parsley here doing very well. And as I said earlier, this is a side of the garden which was really compacted, and nothing grew for 2 years, and now we've managed to fix it a little bit. But we still see, it's hard to see unless you really know it, but you see some cracking there. This is some cracking. That's a sign the soil is not great. These plants look very healthy and beautiful, but they have problems. Look at this fungal disease. We see it only in this part of the garden, and we've got this same variety everywhere in other places, but only here we see this disease. So obviously the soil is not providing perfect nutrition, and therefore some diseases are coming in. That's fine. That goes to prove that only weak plants get problems from pests and diseases. Weak plants might mean also small seedlings, which might not necessarily weak, but it's just because of their life cycle, the phase in their life cycle, they're very vulnerable. So vulnerable and weak and sick plants do get attacked by diseases and pests, but usually you shouldn't see in an adult plant any problems. This is another side of where we've kind of let things go really. These broccoli are producing really nicely now. They've produced a lot earlier than they should have, and you can see a lot of leaves have been dropped as well, and the reason for that is nitrogen deficiency. I mean, these guys were fertilized just with compost and a little bit of chicken manure, but very little, but they've been growing since June. They're very demanding plant. They've been bred to be fertilized, and that's what I don't like about broccoli. They've been bred to be very hungry. Cabbages depends on the variety, but broccoli are usually very, very hungry. And especially purple sprouting, because they stay in the ground for so long, they tend to get tired by now. And so we should have added either more slow release fertility in the ground, perhaps more compost or better compost or more chicken manure. We could spray that now with some organic source of nitrogen, but we're not in the business of doing that. I'm not a big fan of spraying foliarly with nutrients in the... Yeah, we could do it, but at this time also it's very wet and rainy, so most of what we put on the plants would go down anyway unless it's a very dry day. And we could add some top dressing of chicken manure. We might actually do it in a bed to see whether they turn round, but that's much slower to release, so it might not fix the problem. Having said that, what the problem is really is this chocolate spot, a different type of disease, which really is caused by the fact that the plants are weak. They don't have enough nitrogen. Having said that, they do produce a lot. We've harvested a few kilos from here yesterday, so you can't see a lot of broccoli actually now because they've all been harvested. But the plants are doing fine. And my if you allow me to say this, the problem with these plants is they've been bred to be producing a lot, but also be heavily fertilized. And so I'd rather try and select in between these. You can see over there's a very vigorous plant. I would take seeds from a few plants like that. Obviously, you need to know how to save seeds from plants like these. You need to take it from enough plants to preserve genetic variation and diversity, and then slowly breed out of them the need for heavy fertilizer for high nitrogen. These guys here are Bell Star. They've been harvested since July, believe it or not. They've been producing so many size shoots. They're very vigorous and they don't seem to struggle with nitrogen, so much better variety. Bell Star, green Calabrese broccoli, green kale, purple kale, doing really nicely. What else there? We've transplanted, just to give you an idea of what you could have transplanted. These though took a very long time to get to this stage before they could be planted out, because there's very little light and heat at the moment in the polytunnel. And there's coriander and perpetual spinach. They might be used more as a green manure. We won't be able to harvest them until spring, so somebody else will harvest those. And these beetroot have got some cercospora as well, but you can definitely see that the roots have developed well, so we can harvest those and remove the leaves. More red cabbage, doing very, very well. And here's some more baby kale and choy sum. Leeks, doing really good, strong. Parsley. So this is two varieties of leeks. Let me show it to you here. Multi-sown, well, I've discussed this many times. Multi-sow them in plugs. They're not paddled in, they're not very deep, they're just planted as any other plant would be. And there's two varieties, Bulgarian, which go very long, and Bandit, which stays short but go quite fat. And these ones are much more hardy in terms of the frost damage they could get. These ones are a bit more tender. Here we got an interplanting of chard and Chinese leaf. We've harvested most of the Chinese leaf in this bed. There's still a few in this bed. We've been cleaning them. It's important to clean them, otherwise they start to rot if they don't get airflow. So we've removed all the outer leaves to allow airflow and get a better harvest. On this side, I didn't spend much time here with some rocket that's actually starting to spoil now. We've done one cut, unfortunately only one. And these are beetroots that are here from March, so still doing something, but very slow now. And here we've got some mustard, frilly mustard and rocket, sown by our volunteer Alan. And here beautiful Japanese turnips, really nice as a snack, really nice raw. And here some more salad radish. Now the leaves are starting to fade, but they're really good roots. Celery, very strong celery this year, despite it's so dark. I don't know what's the problem here. Let me just get one of these out to show you. Yeah, it's a very strong leek. This actually is a very green stalk, but there's some nice ones in there, so really healthy. Despite at this stage usually leeks, open pollinated varieties especially, they kind of turn their leaves, get a bit of septoria being this fungal disease here. But these are still going strong. Very good variety, Victoria. It's the only plants we bought in this year from Delftland Nursery, organic nursery. So this is cauliflower and fennel, and some beautiful radicchio heads. Look at these guys, really nice and big. They do a very good job of covering the soil as well, endives and radicchio. They're very big, and the outer leaves you discard anyway, but they cover the soil, protect it from the elements. Some lovely pak choi, a little bit of damage on the outer leaves now, because they should have been harvested 2 weeks ago, but we haven't got enough of a market really for them, which is a shame, because they're really lovely and really tasty, and we've got a lot and they grow really well in our soil. But unfortunately people are not so keen on pak choi as they should really. Here we've got some beautiful lettuces. We'll start harvesting this week. Outer leaves again, some more Salanova varieties you can see there, and fennel. And this is a bed which had French beans and radishes in the middle. Now we're letting it go really to cover the soil, and it will kind of rot in, and the flowers will attract pollinators. So it's one of those beds which we've harvested what we could from. Now the French beans have had it, they're not producing anymore. The remaining radishes are going to flower, so this bed is now serving a purpose as an ecological purpose. You know, it's adding organic matter into the soil, and the flowers are attracting pollinators. You know, I reiterate, when a plant is producing seeds and flowers, it's becoming very competitive, and it actually takes a lot more from the soil than it gives to it. But that's fine, because it's giving something above ground by attracting the right insects and giving food to the parasitoid wasps that we need. This is another bed that I've talked about in the past, chard, endive and lettuce, and the endives were all cut at least once to the ground, and they've come back really strong and vigorous, and in doing that they've obviously added a lot of carbon to the soil. The chard is doing well, not as well as in the other beds, but that's fine. So there's more pak choys here, more Asian greens. These are runner beans and borlotti beans that we're leaving to mature on the plant, so then we can harvest them, dry them and eat them as soup beans. Even runner beans, especially certain varieties like Tsar, they can make an amazing dried bean for soups in the winter. The important thing is to let them dry on the plant as much as you can, and then harvest the inner bean, removing all the pod. Those are yellow carrots. Oh, a rat or a mouse must have eaten that one. You can see it. These are really strong, beautiful yellow carrots, Yellowstone. Not as tasty as the orange ones, but they look pretty in a bunch with other colour of carrots. And yeah, this is a Mizuna called Beniushi. There's a bit of weed pressure here because we had carrots here until 3 or 4 weeks ago, and you know, when a weed goes to seed in the carrot beds, it's difficult to remove it, and then essentially we get a bit of pressure from all those seeds. You can see a few weeds there, and those are mustards and Mizunas and Komatsunas, and these are more lettuces for harvesting outer leaves from. Purple top turnips, beautiful turnips. More carrots. Let me harvest another carrot from here. These are the best carrots. We've harvested most of them, to be honest, but these were planted in spring and they've done really well. Chunky, long, depending on the variety. Very tasty, the sweetest. This is Tucson and Napoli, 2 different varieties in here. Tucson have got the red, a bit of a red top, top as in not the leaves but the top of the root. Here's some more Japanese turnips, and here's some more fennel and lettuce, and more pak choys, the very last succession of pak choys. Now these are getting a little bit more slug damage, but you see, not that much. And the stuff you see in the middle is not a weed, it's actually Phacelia that we undersowed. Actually, to be honest, what we did is we had Phacelia here in these beds, and then we let it go to flower because we wanted it to attract pollinators. We crimped it down and planted and removed it, and then planted into the bed. And there were some seeds from Phacelia that stayed in the ground, and we knew they would germinate now, and then as the pak choys come out, the Phacelia will take over, and essentially we've got a green manure that's seeded itself without us needing to do anything. You know, not buying the seeds, not spreading them around. When the pak choys come out, the Phacelia will take over the bed and it'll be fine. Same thing here, you can see it really well here. The Phacelia was removed a bit earlier, so you see that these French beans have stopped growing, now have stopped producing, I should say, and then there are some baby beetroots in the middle, and the Phacelia is taking the place of the beans. And again, the Phacelia was here before the beans. Oh, it's already gone to flower. Look at the beauty. The Phacelia was here before the beans, and now it's seeded itself again. So really good system to save work and keep the ground covered. Now this is a very interesting experiment. We wanted to kill this perpetual spinach, but then we realized we didn't have anything to replace it with, so it was covered with plastic for a month. But it's still coming back incredibly strong. So you see the yellowing and the longer stalks just because it was in the dark. We removed the plastic last week, and look at these guys, they're going to produce again. So just to go and prove, and look at how many leaves we cut before covering with plastic, and they've all become compost. This is an incredible plant. You could use it as a green manure. It produces so much biomass and such strong roots, and then when you kill it by tarping it, it's adding so much carbon into the soil. It's almost like chucking a ton of compost on that bed just by letting this plant grow. Pump sugar into the ground, and then when you don't need it anymore, before it flowers actually, because you don't want it to flower, you cut it. You can cut it multiple times, so you get a lot of compost material, and you lay it on the ground if you don't have a slug problem, and then you cover it with plastic, let it rot in. The roots will die eventually if you keep it for 1 or 2 months, depending on the season, and that's it. And so you lift it, and you've got a beautiful bed to plant into. A lot of these beds, actually, the ones where the pak choys are, were like this, and we did exactly what I've just described to you. We chopped them down, we harvested the perpetual spinach over spring for 4 or 5 times, and then the last cut we left on the ground, we covered with plastic, and that was it. And some more radishes. Now these ones were, I think, the last ones we sowed. Very small, sown direct, and they're doing nice. We can harvest them already this week. These were sown by Alan with the mustard and rockets you saw at the bottom there. It must have been slightly more than a month ago. Yeah, it must have been more than a month ago. So just to show that now in the shoulder season things grow so slowly. Normally, it must have been at least 1.5 months. But normally in a month there would be already half of the bed would be harvested already, because they would all be mature if it was spring or summer. But now there's less and less light as we go ahead, and so things are going to slow down. These were our polyculture beds. Now we've kind of let the kales take over because we don't have a lot of plants to put in as a replacement, and on this side we've let the nasturtiums take over because we use them in salads. And this was an experimental planting of a squash that doesn't trail around, so it produces smaller orange squashes. It's called Amoro F1. It's a hybrid, but it doesn't spread, which is good. This is a false chanterelle. We've got a lot of mushrooms in the ground at the moment. You might have noticed while I was talking. Some more here, false chanterelle, and here we've got some of these white ones, like a field type mushroom. Really a lot of mushrooms, and this is quite it's quite nice. So I'm going to show you one last thing, or a couple of things actually. So one is this bed which had the 2 sisters, corn and squash, of summer, and now we've removed them. A little bit of wood pressure, but not too much. There was a lot of brambles here when we first started this bed. We don't see many brambles anymore, a bit of thistle, a little bit of couch grass, and now we planted Asian greens essentially, and I sowed some radishes in there, and there's some coriander on this side, and they're all going really strong. They were planted not more than 2 weeks ago, I think. You can check that. Here you can see when we have excess composting material, but we don't have the space to make compost with it, or we don't want to necessarily put it in the compost because there's a lot of weeds here, even though they would compost all right, but there might be a bit too many weeds or a bit too much material. A good thing is to just layer it like this in a windrow style thing, and we do it against the hedge. It creates a bit of a habitat for rodents, but that's fine. Ideally you could spray it with whey or with EM or some sort of anaerobic inoculant, cover it with plastic, and they would rot down and become compost in a few months. Otherwise you can leave them on the ground like this. It protects the ground. Eventually in a year or so it will become compost, and there'll be a little bit of wood pressure if you've added some seeds. Or if you remove the weed seeds, it's just a lovely extra space full of organic matter. And we've done it here because it's against the edge, but also because it's very compacted ground here. When they did the work probably to put in this tank, which is on top of a borehole by the way, so that's what the manhole is for here, they must have compacted the ground really heavily. And so by adding a lot of compost here, where we grew a lot of squash, we've harvested all of them, and along the edge we've added that kind of rough mulch. This has done wonders, and now this soil, same treatment was done here, is really soft and lovely and fertile. Here you can see another way that you can use Phacelia. So all the stalks from the Phacelia that we removed from those beds that I showed you earlier, so we removed the stalks. Some of the seeds stayed in and self-seeded themselves over there. Yeah, you see what I mean? They seeded themselves over there. And the stalks we brought here, obviously the stalks had a lot of flowers on them, and now they seeded themselves here as well. And this is amazing because the stalks have acted as a mulch against the weeds, and there's a lot of thistle here. And then we've cut the thistle as it came through the stalks, so that's going to add a lot of stimulation and organic matter to the ground. And then the Phacelia is now germinating from the residue, and now it's going to go nice and big and compete with the weeds. And in the meantime we're harvesting our lovely raspberries, autumn fruiting raspberries, and we've been doing that for a while. And I think I've shown you nearly everything. I'm going to show you one last thing, which is the flower and perennial beds, and then I will leave you to it. So over here, I'm going to take you with me. There's some amaranth and lots of flowers here, lots of herbs. Some of these Flavia is letting go to seed to harvest the seeds from, and some of them are still producing beautiful coloured things. Look at this fennel seed that could be harvested now. I struggle to get good focus today. Comfrey, this should be harvested actually and put it in the compost. We'll see if we get round to it. Let me show you more Chinese leaf actually here that I missed earlier. And yeah, this is the flower beds, edible flowers, and it's gone wild like a forest, but it was done partly on purpose by Flavia, and it's done really, really well. There's lots of things going on in there. There's chamomile, there's nasturtiums, there's tagetes, there's I forgot how that one, lavatera. You know, it's a beautiful flower forest. That's right, with taller sunflowers, and we harvest a lot of edible flowers from here. And the perennial beds have been now mulched with wool, sheep wool, as an experiment to suppress weeds and some strawberries that went a bit wild. So you can see them there. And these are ready to harvest now. Chinese artichokes. Let me have a look if I can show you what they look like. There you go. So this is what they look like. They're like a small worm. Nice texture, not a ton of flavour. It's like a Jerusalem artichoke, but a lot blander flavour. And some globe artichokes sprouting up again from the root system. Those are perennials. Lots of strawberries here. So this is a more wild area if you want, full of perennial plants. There's no annuals. There's a biennial here that just self-seeded, which is chard, but there's oca as well. So this is oca. These are not ready to harvest yet. You harvest them after the frost. They're like a small potato which tastes of lemon. Really interesting flavour. And some Jerusalem artichokes here. See, ready to harvest because the plant has died. The top part of the plant, the canopy, has died. And then at the back here you see some Taunton Dean kale. And that is it, I think. I'm just going to turn the camera around. So that is it for today's tour. I hope you enjoyed it. Just a quick tour around the garden to show you what's going on, what's available to in the garden to harvest at this stage. And I emphasize again the key to have a garden that is this full. Hopefully you appreciated there was no empty bed. A garden that is this full at this time of the year is to plan really well. And a lot of people ask this question: how do I plan to have a succession of things going throughout the year without having empty beds? Because the most common problem is that you have a plant coming out because it's done its thing, you've harvested it, and then you don't have anything ready to put in, and you're like, oh, now it's late. If I sow it now, it'll take a month or 2 or 3 weeks, and it's kind of wasted time. I should have had a plant ready to go in now on the same day as the day when I remove the previous crop. And in order to do that, you have to plan your seedings. You don't think about the beds necessarily. Think about how much you need of each crop and when to sow it, and always sow 30, 40, even 50% more than you need. And so you'll have some backup if the slugs attack it, or if you have an extra gap forming in another bed, you can chuck something in, you can replace something that's coming out. So plan your sowings in order to have things that can go in the bed at every single week of the year essentially. And then you'll have a lot of spare sowings, because sometimes you have something that's ready to go in but there's no space for it to go in, and that will force you to harvest something. That's fine, you'll harvest it a bit earlier and replace it with a new seedling. So sometimes you give away some seedlings to your friends, or sometimes you'll put them in the flower beds, and you be creative, but plan to sow a lot more than you think you need, so that every week of the year essentially you have some seedlings ready to go in the ground. And every plant that comes out can be replaced by a plant that goes in, and that's very important to keep, as you can see here, to keep the ground covered, to photosynthesis going, sugars and carbohydrates and exudates going into the soil and feeding the microbes in there. And eventually that means creating organic matter without doing any shoveling and wheelbarrowing or compost. It's being formed in situ by the plants in conjunction with the sun and the microbes in the soil. So we become more passive, we do less and less work, and the soil improves gradually more and more. All right, so I hope that's useful and helpful for your gardening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next tour, which will be in November. So stay tuned, and I hope to see you there. I will leave you with some extra aerial footage of the garden, and you can really see what I was talking about, how covered the ground is, and how beautiful it looks to be able to work and walk and spend time in a garden like this. And so I wish you to manage to get your gardens, if they are not already like this, as beautiful as this, and even much better.